my show here at Vodcasts, and let's talk about it with SABIA KHATUN. One of the things that have been going around for quite some time now is, what can we say? We grow up, we grow old. We want to find out what young people feel and behave, and what kind of behavioral issues they are encountered with, depending on the environment that they are living in, they are surrounded by, the crowds that they are with. We are going to see whether we can make a difference in the rise or the fall of the youth, whether it's today or tomorrow. We have a lot of negativity towards things that are being experienced, such as trauma, the experiences, and the impacts that this can have on the rise or fall of youth. The changes in their behaviour will be looked at, and their mindset, and what purpose in life do they have, do we have together with them? Is it the right crowd that we're in, or is it another kind of a crowd that we're in? I have with me today who will be sharing her thoughts and views, with yourself, and how we can benefit from it and what we can take from that. I have with me Glen, who is a consultant hypnotherapist who is based here in the UK, and she not only sort of like primarily works with adults, but she finds herself encountering with issues surrounding around her, whether it's work, relationships, and the health. So I'd like to welcome Glen, everyone. So hello and welcome, Katie.
Hello, and thank you very much for welcoming me on to the show, SABIA. It's great to be here with you and discussing this today. So I think it's an interesting topic, and something that, how we grow up influences how we interact in adulthood as well. So if we can make some changes and intervene earlier, then hopefully people will have better outcomes throughout their whole life, not just the youth.
Exactly. Before we actually go on touching upon some of the points, I would like the viewers to know a little bit more about what you do, and how you find yourself with your surroundings every day. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I'm a consultant hypnotherapist, and I, as SABIA mentioned, I normally work with adults, and people come to see me with all sorts of issues, typically relationships or not getting on with work. So things like procrastination, difficulty making decisions, not really knowing what they want from life, and health issues as well. And a lot of that work that I conduct with my clients, a lot of their issues really stem from childhood. There's a very famous saying that the Jesuit motto, "Give me the child until he's 7 and I'll give you the man." And this is because up until the age of 7, we work subconsciously. So we're like little sponges. Children pick up messages from around the world, they're in their immediate world, and it programs them for their behaviour, the way they think and feel about themselves and others. So it's a really key time, and then that carries on into adulthood as well. So often where I'm looking at is going back to where those problems have started, the root cause, to resolve problems that are showing up in adulthood. I also do some work with a local charity, which is a voluntary work, and which is helping kids in the community. They're young carers. So, I live in Kingston upon Thames, which is an area in southwest London, and in our borough, there's over 700 kids that are under the Kingston Young Carers network, and these are children up until from the ages between 5 and 18 who are responsible in some capacity for caring for somebody else in their home. And obviously that's not an ideal situation. In an ideal situation, parents take care of their children, not the other way around, or then children aren't responsible for quite adult duties, and that can create issues later on in life as well. So that's all we're there to do, is to support those kids on that level.
Yeah. What is interesting is, how we would like to find out that although children, young people, young teenagers have experienced problems or situations that, whether it's in their home, in a care home, in a foster care, how do they have a behavior that you feel, it can carry on into the adulthood? Is there a specific situation where you can share with us, where a child may have encountered in a problem home, and hasn't really opened up or said anything or done anything, or adults have found them difficult to understand, and however way they were, things were being reflected on their everyday life in their adulthood? What kind of situations can you tell us that they may have come across?
Okay, so there was actually, and I'll talk about a study. There's a very well-known study that was done in the US. It was in the 1990s, called the ACE study, which is, ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And adverse childhood experiences are divided up into sort of 10 key categories, from emotional, physical, sexual abuse, neglect, parent being in prison. There's these various different categories. And this study was done on a middle class population, and they found that over 80% of people had one or more. And when they looked and tracked back over time, what happened to people with 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., number of ACEs, what their outcomes were in adulthood. So, for example, someone with an ACE score of 6 or more is likely to die 20 years younger than somebody with 1 or less. And partly that's to do with trauma has led to making inappropriate life choices, so alcohol, teenage pregnancy, risky behaviours. Some of it is also to do with, when we experience trauma, our nervous system, kind of like, we've all heard of the fight or flight system. It's like if you imagine if we were ancient people and we were living in a place where there was maybe a big scary bear that wanted to eat us, we wouldn't sit and have a chat on the, like this. We would do one of a few things. We'd either run away from the bear really quickly, we might try and fight the bear, or if there was no way out, we might freeze and be as animate as the table or the chair and hope that he's not going to eat us.
Yeah, if I can interrupt. What age is that child that specifically, who could, because that sounds like that would be a much younger child compared to maybe how teenage children may experience a few things.
But the teenage child will be a product of their earlier years and what they're set up to expect. So if you expect that you're not going to be listened to, you're not going to be taken care of, that you're not important, I'm not good enough, that will reflect in your behavior as a teenager. So if, for example, you are growing up in an environment where your views or your matters, your views, your opinions don't seem to count, or you're trained to deny your feelings, it will come out in different ways. So some people can be quite aggressive, angry. Some people might go into other kind of destructive behavior, eating disorders, cutting, all sorts of behavior, depending on how that person reacts to trauma. Right. So we have fight, flight, freeze, and there's another one called fawn, which is kind of people pleasing. So right. I've certainly noticed working with the young carers, they're probably more likely to be either very frustrated because they're not getting their needs met, or they may end up being people pleasers and caring for other people but neglecting themselves at the same time.
But it
So when
sounds like
we neglect ourselves,
yeah,
that then translates to potential health problems in adulthood as well.
it sounds like there must be some sort of provocation that is leading these young people to behave in such a manner. Would you not say, or I mean, what view do you have on that?
So we all have kind of like, if you imagine we have a stress bucket, and imagine a bin, and you keep putting all these different stresses in there. So there's ones from early childhood, and then ones coming in from school, and parents or not parents being there, or there's a bully at school, or there's a pressure from social media. But all those things keep going in. Now, if you are lucky and you grow up in a nice, healthy family where you're encouraged to express your feelings, your stress bucket to start off with is probably going to be a bit smaller. So you're more resilient, and you can deal with these little these things that come in. If you're brought up in an environment where, is there going to be a parent there that's going to look after me? If I am subjected to some kind of abuse or ill behavior, is somebody going to listen to me? Then the stress bucket gets bigger. And then these things can, something can happen at school or something in the environment, and then it spills over, and that behavior can spill over. So sometimes, when there's challenging behavior, for example, when I've helped out a youth club, is it that the kids are just letting off steam, or is there something that's behind there? Do they need to talk about something? Is there something that's bothering them? That then we can empty that bucket. We also have something called protective factors. So when we're growing up, if we have more protective factors, in terms of, do people care about us? We've got a parent that cares about us. Is there a teacher? Is there someone I can go to? The less protective factors we have, the less resilient we are to dealing with that stress.
Can you say, can you say something about their emotional intelligence, for example? How would you say positivity can be brought back into their mindset, the kind of mindsets that they would be, geared towards, and also, is it a factor for the crowd that they're surrounded by, or they put themselves in? Could you tell us something about that?
So yes, we do get influenced by other people. There's a sort of very famous motivational quote that says, you're the sum of the 5 people you hang around with the most. However, if you've been raised where you don't have healthy good esteem, you're more likely to pick up and hang around with people that also don't have a great esteem and don't look after themselves as well as they could. So that's where you're more likely to fall into a bad crowd if you're more vulnerable. So yes, in terms of our peers, but our parents or primary caregivers. So if a child is in care, they haven't got that stability, even in seemingly healthy or seemingly nice families on the outside. It doesn't mean to say it's a healthy environment either. And so if that environment isn't healthy, that's also more likely to lead to the youth hanging out with a bad crowd, for example.
So
and I think also as well, schools have a big part to play in this, and youth
definitely
youth centres, and we all do, as a collective. As it's all very well to kind of dismiss people as, oh, that's something over there. We all have a responsibility to take care of our young people. They're living in really challenging times right now. If I look at, for example, my parents, when they came out of school, they came out in an environment where there was full employment, there was lots of opportunities. Our young people, last year, the last academic year, GCSEs and A levels were a disaster. It's looking quite challenging for this coming year as well, with COVID and lockdown, with social media. Again, that's another environment that we can put ourselves in, where young people often, they compare and contrast what they're like compared to what they see on social media, and often don't compare themselves very well. And again, it's a kind of a false reality, because what happens is teenagers often compare what somebody else looks on the outside on social media to how they're feeling inside, and it's not a fair comparison. It's apples and pears. So again, that can impact on their self-esteem.
Yeah. So are you saying that our childhood, particularly before the young age, such as, I mean, as young as 7, that you feel that the personalities are being shaped, the beliefs, the
Absolutely.
behaviors, from what you're saying, it sounds like, I mean, I suppose, as you mentioned earlier, children's brains are like sponges, and whatever you give it, it just soaks it in,
Yeah.
and as time is going by, things become, a little bit more like, you become more resilient, don't you, as time goes by. So how...
Well, you have a filter. So before the age of 7, so for example, if you told a 2-year-old child, go and look at the sky, the sky's pink, the child will believe the sky's pink. If you tell a 10-year-old the sky's pink, they will dismiss it because it's not true.
Yeah.
So if you tell a child you're not worthy, you're to this, you're to that, you're not good enough, etc., the child will take it on board and accept it as true.
Yeah. So
even though they're a beautiful, gorgeous child, but the child,
because they're trusting you, aren't they? They're looking up to you as a guardian, as such, especially that younger child. Now,
it's also as well, it's an adapt. We're, as human beings, we are designed to survive. So if you are in an environment where at some level, and we have this very deep primal fear of rejection, because rejection a long time ago would have meant death. So for example, if we were abandoned, if we lived in a tribe and we were abandoned and the tribe moved on, the child would be freezed to death, starved to death, etc. Death. If we're banished by somebody in the tribe and we're told to get out, it means the same thing. So we have this very deep primal fear of avoiding abandonment, avoiding that, and so we will adapt. That's where this nervous system response kicks in, this fight or flight. And so if a child is brought up and they don't know, well, is mum going to be there? Is dad going to be there? I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. That will have a physical effect on their bodies, but also that will program into their minds, well, I'm not acceptable. I'm not lovable. And they'll find situations later in life until that's correct, unless that's corrected, that reinforce that belief.
Yeah. So if we look at the young people between the ages of 12 and 17, what would you say are the common kind of factors that you've encountered from these adults, for example, that any kind of abuse, or the home environment where something has happened, but they've not really spoken about it until later on, whether it's 5 years, 6 years, even 10 years down the line, because they just felt it's not something they could speak out, because it's happening in their home, and maybe that child felt they're protecting the members of the family in the home.
Family secrets is a big one.
How, I mean, well, I hope you're not hypnotizing me. I really do hope. I think Kate is hypnotizing me here. But it's, I've come across situations and I've come across young people where it does make me teary, even to this day, that they have to go through that, and they can't speak up about it until later on, because they just feel it's in their home, And so how does that child then address it? And then people around them, how does it affect the people around them? So I mean, I have a weakness for children, hence, I don't know whether you're hypnotizing me again. I am going to say that again to the viewers out there, but I it's amazing for those children to be able to stay strong. Whether it's good for them or not is another question, but for them to stay quiet and not mention anything, and then later on in their life they do mention, how does that really impact on their life and their loved ones around them?
Yeah, so if you've got a child that's growing up in an environment at home where they can't speak up, and it's almost there's a lot of shame and fear around keeping that family, almost like a family secret. That's why I think it's really important for other people in the community. There's the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. And even if a child gets a remark, or they have somebody else, a teacher, a youth worker, somebody else that can see them for who they are and that can believe, that can make all the difference to how that person escapes that environment when they get older. Again, it's a survival situation. Up until the age of 18, it's very difficult for a child to leave home in those circumstances. I think it's really interesting that a couple of years ago, the coercive control laws have come into play for domestic abuse, but that happens to children as well. And I would really like to see that start to come in for, we have laws against sexual and physical violence against children, but emotional abuse is a big problem. And sometimes it's so covert. And if you're raised in that environment, you don't know what you don't know, because you don't know any different. You don't know it's a problem. You think, oh, I'm depressed, or sometimes it shows up. So for example, a young lady that I was working with recently, she came to me when she was 15 with anorexia. So her trauma, she has a very narcissistic father, and that trauma was showing up physically with anorexia. It was a way for her, rather than to look at the deep pain that was going on, it was a way to focus on her body and to avoid the really deep pain of the rejection from her father. And it was showing up with anorexia. Sometimes you have kids that come along and they're having headaches or migraines.
Well, they're not doing very well at school, for example, as well.
Yeah. So, and a good example of that would be the charity that I've worked with. I've noticed some of the children there have ADHD, but actually when you look at the stressful environment that they're living in at home, then they go to school, it's quite stressful, and they're more likely to be bullied. So that stress is added, and social media, etc. It would be very difficult to concentrate if you're under constant stress. So it may not actually be ADHD. It's a normal reaction to a very abnormal situation.
Yeah.
It can show up physically, often. And if you're not shown or allowed to express emotions, okay, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm sad, might show up as I've got a headache, I've got a tummy ache, I don't feel well, because they don't know the way to express the emotion rather than it.
Yeah. And have you come across where families say, are finding it difficult to handle a situation where, that their child's behavior or the young person's behavior is as such as what you described? There could be aggression, there could be no talking, obviously it's different for each individual young person how they actually behave towards whatever's happened to them, or how what's making them behave the way they are behaving. What kind of things do you think are very difficult to handle for some parents, and where can they actually go to seek for assistance and support? Because the situation could be, it's a single parent raising the children up, or the mother is not around, but the father has mental issues as well. So how does that parent handle that difficult child, what kind of support could be out there, do you think?
So I think it's quite interesting when I've had, because I work in private practice, and when I've had people come to see me, I'll have two different types of parents. So the parents that will actually engage and do some work, and then the parents that don't want to talk about it, because if they do, they probably have to look at some of their own issues, because issues get passed down generationally. So if if a parent was brought up in an emotionally cold environment, then they're more likely to have that kind of parenting style, unless they're conscious about it and make a change. And if they're not going to be prepared to make a change, it's very difficult for the child. If they are prepared to look at it and to support that child, then there's mental health professionals. There are speak to the school, see what support can be got at the school or local youth centres. Sport is a fantastic thing for kids to get involved in as well, to channel that energy. Creative arts, again, something to channel that energy and to give them a more positive and creative focus for their lives. So if the child, that's more about the parent has to work with their child, talking to their child, allowing them to express their feelings. So you're really angry, what's this about? How can I help you? How can I support you?
Yeah.
A lot of children are really looking, they're looking for love.
Yeah.
Coming out as aggression or hiding or eating disorders.
Yeah. So what I'd like to add on to your comment there is, there are helplines out there, and I have one here where it's for parents for advice and support. And then the number is, for our viewers out there, you can make a note of, is 0808 800 2222. That's 0808 800 2222. For our viewers out there who are not coping, I do believe, which I've managed to find a little bit of research from my own end, is do talk to your health visitors as well, if you feel. And I think Katie as well may be able to give us a couple of more strategies, maybe, of how families maybe can cope, or even now that the person is in their adulthood, there may be some strategies where you may be able to give us some tips on, Katie, of how to go about the daily life, and to try and cope the best way that we can, bearing in mind whatever it is that's happened in the childhood and whatever behaviour that has stemmed from it. If you can share with us, Katie, a few strategies of how to go about it.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the GP is a good port of call, because they have on their fingertips, they have other support services, so therapists, mental health counter, CBT is a therapy that's available. Connecting with the school as well, depending. So, for example, my son is now out of education, but his school, they used to teach, or they still do, teach meditation and mindfulness. So petition the school, can they introduce those things if they aren't doing it already, teaching mental health awareness and mental health hygiene, and boundaries, appropriate boundaries, what's acceptable behaviour, what's not acceptable behaviour. And I'd love to see that being taught in schools. As you say, there are helplines. As a parent, if you're really stressed out about the situation, the Samaritans is somebody an organisation you can call at any time. People often think of it as for people only suicidal, but they're open. They're just to talk and to listen, whatever stress is going on. So they're a really good resource for people to access as well.
Yeah, brilliant. We are coming to the end of our show slowly. Are there any last few things that you may want to comment or share with our viewers, and for the benefit of our viewers, before you go, Katie?
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the things that I've certainly noticed when we have children have trauma. So trauma often sounds like a scarier word than it is. For some people, it is traumatic. Some things are misunderstandings. But I think educating our society about trauma and how it impacts on so many of us would be beneficial. And part of what happens when we're traumatized or we're in a situation where we don't feel heard, we don't feel listened to, we're kind of stuck, is, and there was an example recently with the Catholic Church, with the I think it was the Church of England, where there is systemic abuse that's been going on, and going on till quite recently, because it's been covered up to protect the reputations of the perpetrators. And really, I think as a society, we need to start letting those secrets out and encouraging the whistleblowers to make it safe for children, for young people to speak up and to actually be heard and listened to. Because quite often, and that's what I find when working with trauma with adults, it wasn't necessarily what had happened, it was the fact that no one was there for them, no one was prepared to listen to them, no one was there to protect them and to support them. So as a collective, we need to start supporting and start to listening and making it safe to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Katie, and thank you very much. There's some very valuable points there and valuable tips there, and hope to see you again soon on our
Thank
show.
you.
Which I believe I will have a part 2, because I mean it's such a sensitive topic where you cannot cover it in a few minutes of it. But yeah, hopefully we will have someone who directly works with children. And I hope to have a part 2 on this topic coming soon as well. But thank you again for joining me today, Katie. Thank you. Well, viewers, we've heard some drastic situations there, but it's not all doom and gloom. How do we help our young people rise rather than fall? There's trauma-informed medical and mental health professionals out there, and educating our wider society about trauma, because it affects all of us. It doesn't only affect the child or the young person or that one adult, but it affects everyone in that surrounding place. Praising that young person about their good behavior and their attributes, and not labeling them, and giving that support and encouragement along the way, giving the children and the young people some sort of a sense of belonging, and having a connection, whether it's their peers or family members or other adults. And with that, what I will add on, and I agree with Katie, is make it safe, speak up and be heard, and don't let anything get you, because help is out there, and there are supports out there to help you cope if you're not coping. But it's bless you all from me today here at Vodcasts, and I hope you will join me again soon with much more beautiful topics, and do get in touch with me. Goodbye from me for now.